All right, so today we are diving into something that's been honestly kind of blowing my mind a little bit lately.
Oh, I'm intrigued. What's caught your attention?
Spiritual healing, specifically the work of this woman, Denise Ramon.
Denise Ramon. Okay, I'm not familiar.
Yeah, it's her website landed on my virtual desk a few days ago, and it's been, well, let's just say it's been sparking some thoughts.
Interesting. So she's a spiritual healer. Anything more specific? Like, what kind of healing are we talking about?
She actually describes herself as a spiritual healer and a medium.
Okay, all right. Now we're getting into some interesting territory. I'm really curious to hear more about how she presents all of this.
Yeah, that's exactly what I thought too. And it gets even more interesting when you start to dig into the details. Like her whole about us section, where most people would talk about their credentials or their training.
Hmm.
She goes in a very different direction. She talks about having this awareness from childhood,
Yeah.
this powerful gift of healing, as she calls it. But she didn't embrace it right away. Like there's this line, and this is what really caught me. Spirit was not willing to remain silent. What do you make of that? That whole phrasing is
That's powerful stuff. It's interesting you picked up on that line because it really speaks to a certain kind of archetype, right? The reluctant healer.
hmm,
You see this across cultures, this idea of a chosen one, someone who's been given a gift, but they might resist it at first. They might even be afraid of it. But ultimately, they're called to their destiny to use that gift to help others. It's almost like Denise is positioning herself within that lineage, wouldn't you say?
totally. And honestly, it's a powerful narrative.
Yeah.
And it kind of sets the stage for the services she offers, which, by the way, are all centered around this idea of connecting to something bigger than ourselves.
How so? Give me some specifics. What kind of services are we talking about?
Well, she talks about connecting with loved ones who've passed, which, that's a pretty common one in this world. But then she also gets into crafting these tailored wellness plans, and it's all very emotionally driven.
That's a really important point you bring up, the emotional aspect of it all. I mean, when we're talking about connecting with those who've passed or creating personalized wellness plans, it's clear that we're tapping into some very deep human needs, right?
hmm
The need for comfort, for guidance, for a sense of well-being that goes beyond just the physical. And it sounds like Denise is weaving all of that together in her work.
Absolutely. And speaking of weaving, I want to circle back to the language on her website for a second, because it's fascinating. I mean, you've got divine guidance, healing light, bringing the best version of you. It's confident. It's inclusive. It's very deliberate. What's your take on all of that?
Well, purely from an analytical standpoint, you could say it's effective marketing.
How so?
Think about it. These phrases, divine guidance, best version of you, they evoke a sense of hope, of possibility, of transformation. And those are all things that many people seeking spiritual healing are desperately looking for. So in a way, she's speaking directly to their desires.
You're totally right. It's targeted, but also it's kind of playing into these universal desires we all have, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so as we start to wrap up our deep dive into the world of Denise Ramon, at least the world she's presenting on her website, I'm curious, what's sticking with you the most? And I'm not asking you to say whether you believe or disbelieve. Forget about that for a second. Just on a purely thematic level. We're talking about grief, guidance, this idea of unseen forces at play in our lives. What resonates with you?
For me, it always circles back to the human need for hope, for connection, for something beyond ourselves. And whether that comes in the form of a spiritual healer, a religious tradition, a community, or even just a deep connection with nature,
Yeah.
I think it's something that unites us all. We're all searching for that something.
I completely agree, is that yearning, that seeking. And what I find so fascinating is that for some people, figures like Denise Ramon, they provide a sense of hope, a pathway to explore those big questions. And for others, it might be something else entirely.
Exactly. And I think that's the beauty of it all. There's no one right answer. What matters is that we keep asking the questions.
Absolutely. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep that conversation going. And on that note, we are going to wrap up this deep dive.